Hello, everyone. Welcome to this episode of Insider Insights. Before we start today's discussion, let's welcome our guest here, Mr. Warren. He's the ar- the architecture and technology consultant at Microdesk. Welcome, Warren.
Hi, Millie.
So tell us about what you do.
Okay. So it's a bit about background. What do I do? So I began as an architect, and I'm just now transitioning industries. So as an architect, I spent a lot of time modeling and drawing. The types of buildings I've worked on are a lot of mixed-use buildings, retail, some performing arts centers, some college housing, and a little bit of residential work as well. Went to Cornell University and been practicing for about 5.5 years now.
Great. Tell us about your path where you are now.
Oh, the path. It's been rather happenstance. Each company I've moved to has kind of presented itself along the way. I started out with classical architecture, but that really wasn't my training. But that was very important education. Started out with a firm that was just starting to develop their 3D modeling capabilities, so I really got into that sphere of things, and kind of hopped around the DC area, getting increasingly more modern, trying out new building types, and been really into the technology field, as you can tell from my new title. So I'm kind of moving into the technology consulting, and that'll allow me to actually take a rather interesting path where I'll be working with many different architecture firms all at once, not just one, helping them figure out best workflows, the technology capabilities that they could have, and that'll be traveling up and down the mid-Atlantic region of the US. So all the way up to Boston or potentially down to Florida as well, and Chicago.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
What technology and tools are you using for your daily work?
So these days, most everything is three-dimensional. So the software for that is mostly Rhinoceros and Revit. And there are a bunch of cool side rendering programs that are used with that, like Enscape and Lumion. You may have heard of some of them, but yeah.
What are the hard skills that's necessary for entering this industry?
So just a lot of, as with a lot of design work, you need to be skilled at drawing, and a lot of drawing these days is three-dimensional. Some of it's still 2D if you work with smaller architecture firms that still produce kind of the old-fashioned type blueprints that you might see. Yeah, for the most part, you need to be pretty good with computers, pretty good at modeling three-dimensionally, understanding space at that level, and making things look pretty. So some graphics work as well.
And what are the soft skills needed?
There are a lot of soft skills as an architect. There's a lot of collaboration that goes on between you and clients, you and superiors or younger staff architects that you may be working with. There's a lot of collaboration with consultants, whether they be mechanical or plumbing or structural or civil engineering. So you're oftentimes dealing with a lot of different people who have different interests, and sometimes on very difficult design problems where an engineer may think there's a much better way of doing things, and it doesn't quite work with your design. So there are a lot of soft skills involved in convincing them of this or that, and appreciating their perspective and integrating it into your design. And of course, when you're dealing with clients, you need to, impress in this or that way.
How do you balance the problem with? How do you balance the consumer's needs or the client's needs with your architecture's mind?
So that really depends on the firm. certain architecture firms don't care that much about the client's needs, and they'll push their design forward as hard as they can. Others have a much more considerate approach to design, and they'll, from the very beginning, integrate as much as the client's desires as they can into a project. It's really all just about listening and problem solving. So if the client wants a bigger lounge, then you make it happen. If they think the bedrooms are too small, then you push around the walls and make it happen. It all depends. That's why architecture is so fun. There's a lot of problems to solve and a lot of different people's interests involved.
The industry has been changing a lot, and many new technologies and tools has been developing in the industry. And what do you do for ongoing training to adapt to those changes?
Well, architecture is definitely a field where a lot of changes have happened within the last decade or so. The three-dimensional modeling is very important now, and on top of that, there's a lot of data that's associated with everything that you model, and that data is used by all the disciplines and trades that are involved in building a building. So it's very important to do a lot of just research into upcoming technologies within the industry, and a lot of the training you do is just kind of on the job, because we're working with this software on a daily basis. So a lot of what you learn will be just through working with all the people that you have to work with on a daily basis, and people are always teaching you something new that you need to know. And architecture can be very hierarchical as well. The young staff report to a project architect, who reports to a project manager, reports to a principal, and everybody's kind of monitoring the design and making sure things are moving along smoothly. And obviously the older folks in the hierarchy have a lot to teach the younger ones, and knowledge kind of gets passed along this way. But since the technology is moving so quickly, it's important to do a lot of independent research yourself. There are lots of tutorials online for these things as well at this point. Yeah.
Please talk about your experience of training new employees or interns.
Let's see. I've got a bit of experience training. It's a lot of fun, really. Depending on the college that you go to, your experience with modeling technologies might be completely different. Some schools really like to focus on hand drawing still, and to get the basic skills of an architect down first. And other schools have completely abandoned their drafting boards and hand drawing, and they just focus on computer design, computer-aided design. So it's a lot of fun to see where people have come from and the skills that they have, and how those can be adapted to the technology that's available. I've run workshops with lots of students teaching modeling software, but usually the best thing is one-on-one training, so you can really help somebody learn the shortcuts and all the nuances that they may not be aware of.
Awesome. So you studied architecture and also design. How did you find your interest in architecture?
How would I define my interest in architecture? It's a big question. Well, there are two sides of it, I'd say, and that's kind of what's difficult about the field these days. There's the technology side of it, which is really taking off, but then there's also the design side of it, which is focusing more on a study of aesthetics and how good buildings work and why they work the way that they do, and coming up with cool new things. So I kind of have a significant interest in both. So the new position that I've taken at Microdesk will allow me to really look into new and upcoming technologies, which is exciting for me. I enjoy modeling things and rendering them and making them kind of real in a virtual space, because buildings take many, many years to actually get built. And oftentimes they're not not built the way you initially envisioned them. But on the other side of things, design's of course a lot of fun. I like designing houses a lot, and I do that in my free time. Perhaps eventually I'll do that in practice at some point. Does that answer your question? More or less.
Can you give some actionable advices that you think everybody in the age range from 18 to 25 should know?
Yeah, within this industry, as with I'm sure a lot of industries, since the technology is moving so quickly, it's important to be very flexible and to kind of pay attention to where things are going, especially as a young architect focused on the production side of things. You may not have the skills yet to get into design because it takes many years to understand how buildings work thoroughly. You'll be spending a lot of time modeling and designing the smaller elements of a building. And the more curious that you are about how buildings are put together, the more independent you are in presenting your own designs, especially with confidence, because it takes a lot of confidence to design something and then pitch it to a dozen people and then get all their criticisms, which are often very harsh. So I'd say it's very important to be kind of curious in that sense.
Thanks, that's great advices.
Okay.
Thank you for being here today, Warren.
Anytime.
And thank you for watching this episode of Insider Insights. We'll see you next time.